If I could give one piece of advice for what I've learned over the years, this is not the way you impress people, and this is not the way you make friends. As I mentioned in my previous video, even up until recently, I never would have admitted that one of the reasons I started working out was due to social validation and social acceptance. And it seemed like that message really resonated with a lot of people. I was surprised to find out that a lot of people started working out for a lot of the same reasons. And like me, that social acceptance and social validation is a huge reason that many of us got started. That story that I shared about 6th grade camp and my friend pointing out my six-pack to me, that was a huge turning point in my life. And that will always stick with me in my memory because that was one of the very earliest times that I could remember feeling accepted by my peers. For me growing up, feeling accepted was always incredibly difficult. My parents immigrated here when I was young, and I just remember since I was little always feeling like I didn't quite fit in. It wasn't my parents' fault, but particularly at the preschool church that I went to, not understanding why it was that I was the only one that looked different from everybody else. And especially early on, I remember not really understanding what the teachers were trying to tell me or what the other kids were trying to tell me. And thankfully I was young enough that everybody was trying to learn how to talk, but there were definitely times where the language barrier came into play. And like I shared in my last video, that language barrier sometimes led me to learn and use words that I didn't know the meaning of. And because my parents were trying to learn too, there's no way I could go back home and ask them what it meant and the proper usage of certain words. And I think it was this barrier in culture and this difference in upbringing that led me to continue to feel more and more alienated from my peers. And I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but as I got older, the contrast and the difference between myself and other people, it just kept getting more and more obvious to me. I mean, even with small things, I remember going to a friend's birthday party in 4th grade. For whatever reason, my parents had never thought to take us to an American movie theater up until then. And so I remember it was at that birthday party that my friend Trevor's mom took us all to the movie theater to go watch the premiere of Lion King. I remember being super excited and making the statement that, wow, I had never been to a movie theater before to watch a movie. And I remember one of the girls there was just shocked that I had never been before, and she exclaimed, "Are you lame? You've never been to a movie theater before?" And I just remember to 9-year-old me at the time that those words just stung, are you lame? And so I remember from pretty early on always looking for opportunities to try to fit in, not to do anything or say anything that seemed too out of place. And so it was right around then that I realized that physical fitness and being fit was something that everybody kind of liked. Some of the more popular and well-liked kids at school were the ones that played baseball and basketball. And so in a bid to kind of be like them, I remember around that time starting to exercise. And so there was a group of friends, about 3 or 4 of us, that would spend recess running around the track and doing push-ups voluntarily. And I remember when a group of the girls would ask us why we were doing that, I would always say, because we're trying to get buff by the end of the year. This desire to fit in and be socially accepted didn't really get kicked into high gear though until I got into junior high. Our family had just moved, and so going to a new, largely non-Asian school and not knowing anyone really drove a very strong desire to fit in. I remember the 2 most popular guys that everybody used to follow around, Jace and Matt. They were like the prototypical athletic, tall, attractive white guys. In fact, Jace was even drum major of the band, so we quite literally followed him around. I still remember one particular day when we were all standing around the quad and somehow we started talking about Jace's biceps. I still remember in the middle of that conversation, he pulled up his sleeve and flexed his bicep and everybody was super impressed. But unbeknownst to everybody, I had been doing push-ups and sit-ups and working out at home by myself. And after seeing his bicep, I made the statement that, hey, my arm kind of looks similar to that too. And to this day, I don't think I've been shut down harder than that before by a group of people. I was repeatedly told to shut up and get out, and nobody would even entertain me rolling up my sleeve to show them. Although it was hard not being accepted at school, ironically, there was no place harder to not be accepted at than at church. You see, the reason that my parents moved our family right at my transition into junior high was because they were part of this church leadership that was trying to establish a Chinese congregation as a part of this larger, mostly white church. And with that came a lot of uncomfortable race dynamics that even to this day, I don't think a lot of people knew that I was going through. You see, because I was one of the only few Asian teenagers and because I was one of the leader's sons, I think there was an amount of unspoken pressure on me to try to get integrated. And unfortunately, again, that pushed me into situations where I largely found myself to be the only Asian person. And with that, again, came the familiar feeling of feeling like I wasn't being accepted or that I didn't quite fit in. I remember at one of the very first youth group meetings on Wednesday nights where we went around and just introduced ourselves to everybody, whereas most of the other people were sharing, that they played soccer soccer, they played baseball, basketball, whatever sport that they were involved with. But because I didn't play a sport and in an effort to appear athletic and active like everybody else and to fit in, I remember introducing myself and telling them that I was actually into spear fishing. But the truth was, my parents had bought me a goggle snorkel set with some flippers and a spear gun, and I would swim around in my friend's pool and shoot at little targets under the water. But again, in an effort to appear athletic and to fit in, I portrayed it as me going into the ocean to snorkel and hunt for actual fish. I still remember one of the girls incredulously asking me, "You actually go into the ocean with a spear to catch fish?" To which I casually responded yes, hoping that no one would catch on that I was trying to in fact stretch the truth. But you know, despite doing that, the fact was it actually didn't help me fit in anymore at all. And what's even worse than that, it didn't even give me the drive to actually pursue those things that I was interested in. I was actually interested in spearfishing, but realizing that it wasn't something that was deemed socially acceptable or cool, I ended up not pursuing it any further, and those flippers, those goggles, and that spear gun just sat for years. This continued to get worse when the youth group meetings got moved from meeting at church on Wednesday nights to meeting at one of the girls' families' homes on Wednesday nights. It was so difficult to want to go, and again, being the only Asian there, it was always difficult to feel like I belonged. I remember one time in particular showing up a little bit late, and they were having a pool night at that home's backyard. I didn't bring trunks, and most of the people were in the pool, and so I just remember standing around on the lawn next to the pool, just kind of standing there not really knowing where to go or what to do with myself. Most of the people that weren't in the pool were all parents, and they were just kind of lounging around by themselves. It was at that point that I remember that family's giant 90-pound dog came up behind me, and I'm pretty sure it was just trying to be friendly. But the dog jumped on my back, and I still remember its claws digging into my back, and I probably just wanted a hug or something, but me being this small, 120-pound person, this small Asian kid with a 90-pound dog hanging on my back, I just didn't know what to do. I remember standing there for what seemed like an eternity, waiting for somebody to come help me when eventually one of the parents came to get the dog off of me, but it felt like an eternity. But I just remember the awkwardness and the embarrassment of that situation, feeling like everybody else in the pool, they were just kind of looking at me from a distance and laughing. That was really largely the lowest point that I ever felt as far as social acceptance goes. But despite that, it wasn't like I didn't continue to at least try the best way that I knew how to try to get people's attention and to be accepted. And again, not playing any sports, the next best thing that I could figure to portray myself as athletic and be accepted was my hobby for biking. I used to always be super into biking. In fact, one of my oldest screen names is Biker Guy. But I remember after that dog incident, instead of just not showing up to those youth group meetings at all, I would always conveniently schedule my bike rides past that house at the exact same time youth group was supposed to start. I remember I had this blue specialized bike helmet that I thought was super cool and these Oakley M-frame sunglasses that weren't even mine that I borrowed from a friend. But I just specifically remember donning that gear and riding my Trek bicycle past that house, thinking that if I just had the right gear and the right setup and looked athletic that I would be accepted then. I remember one time they even asked me as I was riding by, "Hey, are you even going to come inside and stop over at youth group?" And I said, "No, I'm busy. I'm in the middle of a bike ride," and just kind of rode off. Just absolutely trying so hard to appear athletic just in order to be accepted because I thought that's what you needed to be accepted. I remember specifically even thinking to myself, if I could just learn to ride a wheelie and I could just wheelie past this house, that they would be impressed and it may increase my social standing in that circle somewhat. But again, like I shared as the spearfishing went, because I wasn't seeing any tangible results from that, I ended up just giving up on that too. This all culminated for me when one day there was a whole church meeting that happened at my friend's house. We were all super into DDR at the time, and his family actually purchased a DDR arcade machine which he had in his garage. We would always go over there every weekend to play on it and to practice, but this time the whole church was going over to his house, and I specifically remember thinking that this was my opportunity to finally show people what I got, to again really wow them with my skills and hopefully make some friends and be accepted along the way. And so in an absolutely genius move in a bid to make new friends, I pretty much hogged the machine the entire time and didn't let anybody else play on it. As if I hadn't spent enough time on that machine already. With everybody there, I had to spend even more time to show them what I had. And I ended up not really giving anybody else an opportunity to even really try it. I don't know if you guys missed it, but I even had to throw in my signature sick moves of using my hands instead of my feet to slap the pad. So granted, it was a fun time. Honestly, it didn't help me make any new friends because one, I learned that people aren't impressed by athletic prowess, especially not as demonstrated through DDR. And it's obvious to me now, but the way to make friends confidence is just to be confident and to be friendly, to be open and genuinely interested in others and their interests over yourself. Unfortunately, that's not something that I learned until much later, and a lot of this confidence that I gained to be able to talk to people, it really started when I got confidence in myself, and when I finally learned to accept myself and truly be comfortable with who I was as a person, weird interests and all, and not for other people. And so it was kind of a catch-22. I thought I needed athleticism to be socially accepted, but what I actually needed was confidence. But that confidence only came after I gave up pursuing the social acceptance and started pursuing exercise and fitness for myself. Which now goes into why I'm showing this workout video that some of you may recognize. This is actually a workout that I filmed 5 years ago. This is not a recent video. But from the last workout video, and a lot of people made this observation and they're right, I don't really look like this anymore. In fact, looking back now, this video probably shows the point at which I was probably the most shredded, the most ripped that I've been in my entire life. And this is not the way that I look today. And with a lot of the comments in that video, it was kind of easy to fall back into that trap of the social validation and wondering if I'm not as ripped as I used to be, and kind of again feeling that familiar desire for social acceptance and social validation again. But one of the things that I realized looking through this old footage and also just thinking about these old stories that I've shared with you guys is that even though I may not necessarily look as ripped now as before, but that's the thing about growth, and that's the thing with change. Often as we grow and we get older, things that used to matter to us a lot don't matter as much anymore, and the process of growth shifts your focus to other things. And nowadays I can honestly say that the mental maturity and the mental growth that I've experienced, that it far outweighs any of the potential benefits that come with just simply having a very ripped body. And a super clear example of that is how I used to want to learn how to wheelie just to impress people and to get them to like me and accept me, and realizing now that that type of motivation wasn't enough to carry me through the hours of practice that it took to achieve a wheelie. But instead, what actually got me here was simply the desire to want to improve myself day after day, to achieve a dream because it was simply always a dream and it was a new skill that I've always wanted to learn, and the mental toughness and resolve that it took to get here, that's not something I would trade for just a ripped body anymore. So although it took years and so many failed attempts to try to get people to like me and accept me, I think I've come to realize that ultimately the person that is the most likable and most accepted is the person who no longer even considers how likable and how acceptable they are in the first place, but instead shifts their focus and attention to others. And the only attention to self is the desire for self-improvement, to pursue the best version of self possible and to enjoy the journey every step of the way.